Do you want to know what's going round? See what's the talk of the town on Real Talk on the radio today.
And welcome to Real Talk Radio 97.5. You're listening to WKDWradio.com live from Northport, Florida. I've got special guest in the house, Mr. Mayor Phil Stokes from Northport. I also want to send a special shout out to Remax Palm Realty, Lions Title and Trust, and Hardin Insurance Group, all located on Toledo Blade in Northport, as they are very, very special sponsors of ours and mine as far as Real Talk Radio goes. Thank you so much for being part of it. And you, the citizens, are a valuable part too. So if you have any questions along this journey here for the next hour, please feel free to put them in the comments, and I will put the comments up, and we'll get your questions answered. How you doing there, Mr. Mayor?
I'm doing good, John. Good to see you.
So I understand that we might have had a successful event yesterday or day before.
We did. Yeah, I had a State of the City District 5 address. It was, it was really a great event. It was an opportunity to really bring people in my District 5 area. And there were there was a good number of legacy Northport people as well from around the city. But it was predominantly the Wellen Park folks who, don't normally tune into some of the Northport stuff going on. So it's a chance to let everybody know what's going on, all the new things happening in the Wellen Park district, as well as throughout the city, because there is so much going on. But we had great attendance.
The beautiful thing is there, as you mentioned, there were a lot of new faces, which is very impressive.
Yeah, in total, there was, we counted somewhere around 250 attendees, which is pretty amazing. And between Val and I, we thought we knew probably a little over a third of the total group. There were a lot of faces we didn't recognize, which is great. It's a sign that people really, they want to know what's going on. If you make it convenient and easy and you're able to reach them. I spent a lot of time reaching out, not just social media wise, but throughout the individual communities, and reaching out to folks who could in fact reach people within the community. Each of these HOAs have, they own a little network of information as to what's going on and where, and, tapping into that group really helped, because it is hard to get the word out. We have 70 HOAs in the city of Northport from end to end. That's a lot. And the HOA people, they live sometimes in a little bubble because they got their amenities there, and they get out and about, but they don't always, get locked into all that's going on sometimes around them. So this was a really successful. It was a very upbeat, a couple of hours. I had two guest speakers, County Sheriff Kurt Hoffman and County Commissioner Ron Kutzinger, both of whom have served our county for years. They're great public servants. They speak well. It was a pleasure to have them, and they each spent 10, 15 minutes speaking on various subjects, and then that led up to my State of the City address. So it really went well. It was a beautiful, beautiful event, and that Solis Hall in downtown Wellen is great. So
it is, and it's a great venue to speak in. It really projects the sound really well, and so I think a lot of people that were there probably enjoyed the atmosphere itself too.
Yeah, you sit there, you can look right out onto the grass field or out onto the pond, the lake, it's a pretty venue. For those people who want, you can find the entire presentation. The address is up on social media. You can find it by going to my Facebook page. You can also find it on John's KDW, yeah,
Yep,
and
and
it's
Real
up
Talk.
there on Real Talk. And because I've had a ton of people who have seen posts on Facebook ask, like, geez, I missed it. What happened? What's going on here? What's going on there? And I'm just sort of referring them to the Facebook post, because they can link right on and watch it.
Well, and Jeremy Ansel, good afternoon, Jeremy, and he says thanks for attending the Cub Scout Pack 257 Pinewood Derby. I know
Yes.
there were several of you guys out there. I think Barbara
Oh,
Langdon
yeah.
was out there also.
Oh yeah, Jeremy, thank you. I thank you for inviting us. This is my third year at the Pinewood Derby. I love it. The kids are incredible. The families are great. It's a funny thing. As an elected official, to me, the greatest treat, and really one of the greatest ways to connect with the community, is to be part of the everyday events that go on, whether it's the Little League games, whether it's the softball, whether it's football, whether it's things like, the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. All these things bring us into contact with, the citizens of the city who aren't either advocating for the stuff we're voting on, or arguing against the things we're voting on. These are people who get up every day, raise their families, go to work, enjoy living in Northport, and to be able to get to know some of them and be able to hear the things that matter to them and how they feel just about their lives and the challenges and the opportunities. That's what matters. And those are the people equally as important as the vocal voices. And they really help us better understand if we're doing a good job or if we're not.
Well, and I'm going to give a shout out. The first like of the day comes from Daniel Fenton, one of the world-renowned reporters from Northport. Fantastic job he does. I always enjoy running into Daniel at the events and kind of swapping out some stories on what we're covering and how he visions Northport and the growth and it's kind of fun mixing it up with citizens that attend all these events like you were talking about, and that's the cool part about the Girl Scouts and even the Cub Scouts. And I'll give another shout out, Pack 257. That engagement with the community is essential.
Oh yeah.
If you were going to talk to the citizens now about the impact that they're going to feel from the next couple weeks or months that we have to discuss the referendum, I know we've talked about this on Monday with Barbara Langdon, and we had City Manager Fletcher on the Friday before. And we're kind of hitting these things pretty heavy for a lot of good reasons. Preemptive strikes on some of these budget, I call them budget items because they're budget items whether we want to admit to them or not, because they're going to have to be repaired. They're going to have to get fixed. Spending is something that you guys take a good hard look at. I want you to kind of go back a couple weeks though and address the workshop that you just had, because you had brought that up to me before. Can you give that overview of that and how that's impacting the vision of what you guys are doing now?
Yeah. Obviously some people are aware, not everybody yet, that on May 13th, we have a referendum coming up, and the initial question on emergency borrowing is very different than November. So many people are saying, God, we already voted on all this stuff. No, you did not. You did not. In November, we asked for very broad borrowing authority for a host of things, as well as emergency borrowing for eminent infrastructure failure, for projects regarding safety and health related, which was very broad, and the citizens voted no. We by only 300 votes, but nevertheless they voted that down. This referendum, the main question is for emergency borrowing regarding natural disasters. It is for debris removal and the repair or replacement of projects that are created by virtue of these disasters. And it's a very specific, narrow ask. It's what the citizens, who so many of whom voted no originally in November, told us they wanted. If you guys had made it only for natural disasters, we would have supported this, but you made it a little too broad. So we heard them and we came back. And the reason we're doing this so quickly in May is because we don't want to go through another hurricane season without having this ability. We're the only one of 411 municipalities. That's item one. Electing, we're trying to change the charter so our attorneys and our clerk can not be forced to, within a year, live in the city of Northport. City manager, electeds, they've got to, and with good reason. The other two positions are statutory. They're legal in nature. They really guide our leadership in the legalities of how things are supposed to be done. Living within the city, their decisions, their advice has nothing to do with where they live. So quite honestly, we don't see a reason why they should have to live in the city. It gives a much broader base of candidates to pull from, and we hope that passes. The other three are the issues you speak to and that tie into the budget. A police headquarters, a solid waste transfer station, a wastewater treatment plant. These projects are necessities. They are not by any means wants, they're needs. And these referendum items, these three, are not to ask for permission. They're not. The decisions to do these types of projects, they start with a need, with a department saying, or with us recognizing we need something. And then we go out to outside independent consulting experts, people who study the need and figure out what's the best way to do it and what's the right size. And they come back and report with professional studies as to what they think is the best approach. Then staff reviews it. It's presented to commission. Commission decides. Commission's decided a police headquarters of this scope is needed. We've decided a solid waste transfer station is needed. And because of the Department of Environmental Protection looking at our old wastewater plant and determining it needs a goosen and a greasen and be brought up to standards, we need to do that one. And so once those decisions are made, then it comes down to a question of how we best pay for them and what's the best way. And our financial experts, again, internally as well as outside, our bond councils and others, advise us as to what's the most fiscally responsible way to do it. Since we cannot borrow money and without citizen approval, that's the ask. Is issuing bonds for these three projects the most fiscally responsible way to pay for them? And when it comes to the solid waste transfer station, when it comes to the wastewater treatment plant, if not all, almost all of the cost of paying for these can be borne by the district and enterprise funds that are in existence. I believe our director of public works indicated we might be looking at $2 a month cost for the wastewater treatment plant, $24 a year. It's hard to gauge on the on the solid waste transfer station. On the wastewater treatment plant, not quite sure because we don't know what the full scope of the improvements we need to do will cost us. The police headquarters, on the other hand, is a large ask, and for the average citizen who has, say, a slightly under $300,000 assessed value for their property, it's right in and around the 150, 160 range for the year, $150, $160. So it's a little over $12, $13 a month. It's an increase. It's a cost. It's going to be an ad valorem item on their property tax bill if it passes, and it'll end when the project's paid for. As population increases and more tax-paying citizens are added to the rolls, which happens every year, the cost per year, the assessment per year will actually go down. And, it's a cost that if we want to maintain our high level of safety and public, security, we're going to need to do that. And we want to spread the cost over 30 years so that new businesses, new citizens who come, new residents, help pay that cost. Why should it always fall on the backs of our existing citizens? And that's what happens with all our projects now. We have to scrape and save it and pull it together to have the money. That comes at a cost. Take the wastewater treatment plant or the solid waste treatment plant. If we can't pass this referendum and borrow the money by issuing bonds, we have no alternative but to raise the cost of solid waste dramatically over the next couple of years to collect the money we need to build the thing. And then in the 2 to 3 years it takes to save that money and scrape it together, the cost of doing the project is going to go from the estimated 14 million to God knows 20.
Quick question.
Yep.
You several times with the water treatment plant, you have mentioned the EPA.
Yeah.
If we're already being eyeballed by the EPA as a city leader, isn't that a caution that should be said to the citizens that because we're being looked at by the EPA, they're going, if we don't handle these issues, couldn't they push us into doing it quicker?
Well, they really already have. We've had, with heavy rains, we've had some spills that stay within our ponds. So it hasn't, we haven't had spills that have gone out into the community or into areas that have caused any danger to our citizens. But we've had problems. The capacity of that plant is not adequate to handle the growth that we've gone through. And it's just as simple of it has to be done, and it has to be done in fairly short order. And it will be scrutinized and overseen by the Department of Environmental Protection to make sure it's done to their standards. So we are under regulatory order to get it done. And it has to be one way or the other. So there's no choice, and it's amazing. One of the things I said in my address the other night was, with all the things that many people are aware of going on in the city and all the growth, we've done all this by keeping our property tax millage rate flat. 5 years, we have not increased it one iota. Now, property values have gone up, and that's not a bad thing in terms of building equity in our properties for all us property owners. But at the end of the day, you write a little bigger check because the county's assessed the property values higher and you end up paying more in taxes. But the one thing the city can control is the property tax rate itself, and we've not increased it. This year, with the ask for folks to vote an increase or an ad valorem tax for the police headquarters, they're going to, if it passes, pay a little bit more. And we're hoping to bring it back to your original comments, in the first budget workshop, we discussed, as we try to set our parameters for the budget for 2025, 26, is it possible that we could actually cut our millage rate a little bit? And, what would that look like if we tried to find a couple of $1 million in the budget and passed it through in terms of a millage rate reduction? How much would that really mean? What would it lower the rate to? How much would it put back in the pockets of citizens? And what would be the impact on services that the city's providing? Would it affect salaries? Would it affect employees? When we budget and we approve staffing, there are a lot of positions that, we staff for, but don't necessarily get filled because we haven't been able to find the right people. Maybe there's a little savings there. Maybe there's savings any one of a number of places. That is the nature of staff's job, not commission's job. Commission sets direction. So I was happy to see that all of us unanimously felt at least we should explore the possibility. And in workshops, we don't vote with motions. We do consensus to give direction to staff. And unanimously, we did ask staff to go look at this and address the questions we had. Is it possible? What it would mean? What would be impacted? And to bring that back, because first of all, maybe the pain would outweigh the benefit. Maybe the services that would be affected would be too onerous and wouldn't be worth the few dollars or whatever we were able to return to the citizens. There's also the issues of there's some bills floating around the State House now in Tallahassee that are going to increase, we hope, at least as property owners, we hope would increase the homestead exemptions. That is a good thing for property owners, but it's not such a good thing necessarily for municipal governments because it will cut back on the amount of revenues they get. Now, some people will be delighted with that, and maybe that will happen. Additionally, from the federal government on down and everybody getting a dose of Doge here and there, it's the city is looking at doing its own versions by really looking internally to see where we can save. And, yet we don't know. The state may well put some restrictions on municipalities in terms of property tax rates. We don't know. There's a lot of ifs. So our ability to give back in a rate reduction depends on a bunch of these things. And it depends on what our staff comes back with. I have great hope that our commission shows restraint in weighing in prematurely on how we might find some of these cost savings. That really, while everyone, not just our commission, but all the citizens have ideas about that, it's staff's job to figure it out. And it's important that they do it because they have the best perspective on how it impacts what they do and the services they deliver. They don't get to vote on it. They just get to present what they consider to be the smartest and most efficient and least painful way to do it. Then commission will review those things and make some hopefully smart decisions on whether or not we can, and if we do, how we do it. But it's based on staff. So, that's how the sausage kind of gets made with this. And it will all factor in. If the referendums pass, that helps us a little bit because citizens are willing to make that sacrifice on the police headquarters and step up and make that financial sacrifice. Makes it a little easier for us to try to figure out if we can save on the other end by lowering a millage rate a little bit. If not, then we look at, well, we're committed to doing the police headquarters because it's a need. How are we going to pay for it? And quite frankly, Police doesn't have their own special district. Police department gets funded out of general fund, and the general fund is predominantly funded by our property taxes. So, all these things interconnect, and I hope citizens try to take a little time. I mean, it's not rocket science. It's not something you have to have a PhD to understand, but you do have to take a little time to think about this stuff and try to see the perspectives, because you all got to vote on this. The citizens made it clear to us, close as it was, that borrowing authority was something that the citizens wanted to retain the control over. And we respect that. But it also comes with a responsibility to be engaged, listen to what the issues are and what the individual asks are, and then hopefully think about how it's going to affect the city, how it's going to affect you as a citizen, your family, your city, how what happens if you don't, what happens if you do, and then come out and vote with as much knowledge as you can, and help us out and make that decision in a smart way. And that's why, we got 2 more town halls left, April 2nd and April 24th. The second is at the Wellen Park Safety Building on Prado and Route 41. And the second one on the 24th is at the Suncoast Technical, and they're at 6 at night. Please, if you have questions, if you think this is a ridiculous idea and an outrageous, ask on the part of your city, and you hate this idea, come to the town halls, challenge us and staff, ask your questions, try to figure out why it is, since we live in the city, since we pay taxes like you, and with the information we have, we see the need and we think this is the best way, but you don't come and figure out why it is we're seeing things differently. That's the challenge. That's, I think it won't help everybody see their way through, but it might help some.
The most important thing, and we started the show out with this, is the new faces that were at Solis the other day. You had mentioned that you and Val both were very impressed with the new faces that you saw there. Along those lines, that same group of people, what was the Q&A like at the end of the event? In comparison to what you're talking about, did people have questions and come at you, and were their minds changed?
Remarkable. Almost exclusively the questions revolved around, what are they building on this corner? What are they building on that corner? When's this road going to connect to River Road? When's that road going to connect to 776 towards Englewood so it's closer to the beach? It was really kind of remarkable that most of the questions revolved around those types of things. I did get some questions afterwards, about, subjects that were a little broader, but one of the questions that nobody asked, and if our city manager is listening, he's going to go, I can't believe he's really going to ask this question of himself. But it's the question for people who are new to the city, and many of whom who live up in the Wellen Park area. Why should we pay for the infrastructure that's going to benefit Legacy Northport? We already pay like CDDs in our West Villages area for all the infrastructure built up here. And it's a good question on the surface, but there's a really great answer to it. And the answer is that overall, Northport's a bedroom community, a residential bedroom community. We are struggling, and as our population is exploding, we're adding more and more and more residential properties. Granted, they're starting to be more of a mixed, diverse type, not just single family platted properties, but everything from townhomes to condos to apartments to you name it. And anyway, what happens is we still are predominantly residential in nature, and only about 10% of our revenue for the city comes from non-residential taxes. So as we grow, we've tried harder and harder to try to build that commercial and light industrial base. And the reason why we all need to support the infrastructure growth in our city is to attract that kind of development, because it's that kind of development that's going to be able to spread the tax base and prevent us from having the kind of millage rates that some of our surrounding cities who were platted as residential communities have. And you can see them within the surrounding counties. So you can't escape that we're part of a bigger village, and that we all contribute, and that there is a return on investment for that. That's going to inure to our benefit. You sit in the areas of the city where you have higher property values, like Wellen Park in some cases, and when our property tax rates go up, it's a bigger financial impact to us than it is for a property owner who has half the property value. So it's in our interest to want to see the city develop the proper way. And whether you like it or not, Wellen Park's village is Northport. We are all part of this city, and we all contribute. We all pay 2/3 of our taxes to the county of Sarasota, a lot of which goes to the schools. And most of us in Wellen Park and in other areas of the city, a lot of the HOAs, we're of an age where we don't have kids in the schools. Yet we pay in because we're paying as part of a bigger village, and we want our young generations to grow up educated. We want our community to be healthy. And when you provide for that, it enhances our property values. It makes our quality of life better. And so that's the answer. And it's funny that no one asked the question, but to me, it was probably the most important question to ask if you lived in Wellen Park. But it shows you, everybody wants to know what the new restaurants are going to be.
Well, here's the other thing. I saw a post that we're getting ready to start the Price Boulevard project.
Nah, that's just a myth. That's never going to happen. The shovel's going in the ground this coming month. Thank God, finally.
Yeah, it needs to happen.
My God, if there were ever a project that drilled home the reality of why it's important to address needs and figure out ways to get them done, and it's that project. A project that 15 plus years ago would have been probably 5 million is now close to 80. It's just, it's going to live as testament to future generations of city leadership that do not kick the can and find ways to address need. And sometimes solving those problems doesn't make a lot of people happy, but that's the job. And you got to do what you know is in the best interest of the most people. Think of all the struggles we have with connectivity and transportation. If the city had any idea what growth we would go through, think of all the things that could have been done 15, 20 years ago in the city to help make it a little easier on us all now. And that's not to say that people who were leading the city then did wrong, because they didn't. They just didn't know. Who could have figured? But we know, and it would be negligent to turn a blind eye to the decisions that have to be made now, which will set the stage for the next 50 years. If we don't do it, knowing all we know now about how important, it would be negligent. And the police headquarters is a great example. In 2006, when we moved into the existing building, it was already outgrown. Already. And we know now that we're running 5 years plus ahead of our growth curve. If we don't do this and we don't build it out for a 40-year growth, because in 25 to 30, we'll be close to that. It won't take 40, because we're planning to be a couple of 100,000 people in this city. As much as that may create a collective gasp on the part of our citizens here now, that's how general development plotted this city out. We can't control growth. Controlling growth is a myth, but managing it smartly, strategically, that is a reality. That's something you can do, but it comes with pain. There is no doubt it is difficult to do it, and every decision you make has consequences. And that's the adage we're pushing, the best for the most, because it can be painful.
I think better said, every decision that wasn't made can be very painful.
Well, there's that too.
You've got that. Not picking, because I actually like Mayor Fletcher's "I'm not going to attack backwards."
Mayor, what'd you do, demote?
Or I'm sorry, not Mayor Fletcher, City Manager Fletcher. Whoops. But when you're looking through the lens backwards, it's easy to play Sunday or Monday quarterback.
Yeah.
I like the fact that we're not trying to do that. We're not, going backwards with the conversation, but we do have to talk about if things were done, what the cost would have been in comparison to today. Because if we don't address these now, every single year, these projects all go up in cost. They're not coming back down.
We learn a great deal from the past, and so it's never good to ignore it. And it helps us understand, some of the things. It's in government, it's easy to pick apart electeds and city leadership and say, oh, they should have done, shoulda, coulda, woulda. But it's not so much that as it is anticipation, planning, being able to try to envision where you're going to be down the road. And that's something I think you get better at when you study the past, because history tends to repeat itself, and you do learn from those things, and especially when it's just in our faces. I mean, God, every year thousands of new people come, so you can't deny it, you can't ignore it, and you just got to plan for it. And it's not like we're totally unique as a city this way. Across the country, everywhere in the world, cities go through their growth spurts as they evolve. So we can learn from them and see what they did right, what they did wrong, where they didn't anticipate. And we live in an environment where costs keep going up, so it's even more critical that we make some of these harder decisions and do it in the most cost-effective ways. Things do cost more, but ignoring them because they're going to cause some pain costs more in the long run. It's like addressing a medical need. If you know you got something wrong with you, you just can't pretend it doesn't exist and think it'll go away. It gets worse. And so you really do have to think it through, figure out the best way, make it the least painful, and move forward. And that is what we try to do every day.
One of the topics that I don't think gets enough sunshine is one of Frank Lama, really good guy in public works on the recycling side, but that transfer station, he is, I can't believe he hasn't been plucked by another community for his mindset on the recycling program. But when we talk about the borrowing power and different things like that, the transfer station, it has the potential to have major cost savings
That's
to
correct.
the community. and that is already in the budget. I think that really has to be highlighted and talked about because of the hard work that was put into the recycling program. And we actually are one of the only cities around us that actually makes money
That's
from
right.
our recycling program. So when they ask for another transfer station, for me as a taxpayer, it is very easy to say yes to a transfer station once you understand that there's
Yeah.
hourly wages involved, there's wear and tear of vehicles involved, there's all kinds of things that happen with that transfer station that actually helps eliminate the cost back to the citizens through staffing and equipment. Can you
You,
kind of talk about that a little
yeah,
bit?
you are right on the money. If for people who want to see it in black and white, go to the city's webpage, go to their website, click on the big yellow banner. It'll drop down a host of pages and scroll down till you find the solid waste transfer station. You'll see charts and you'll see cost analysis. But in a nutshell, the projections after it's completed and goes into operation will save us almost $1.5 million a year right from the outset. With that savings growing over the years as we add customers from inside as well as outside the city limits.
Right.
As John said, savings in labor, in equipment, not having to put those vehicles on the road heading up to Sarasota. It's just incredible. I think the cost I learned was it's like $42,000 for a garbage truck. 42,000. It takes us 2 years lead time between the time we place the order and we get it. So if we're at a point with growth of our city where we have to start adding lots of trucks and lots of bodies with the cost of benefits and taxes and everything else, we're talking huge increases in our solid waste costs. This project is a no-brainer. The ROI, the return on investment of this particular project, roughly $14 million project, is very well maybe less than 10 years, which is tremendous. And you hate to say any expense is a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer. It keeps us at the cutting edge. We are an example for the county, for the state on how to do something right. And hopefully people see this. This is a smart one. The wastewater treatment plant, like I say, is a necessity. We got to do. And the wastewater treatment plant up in Wellen Park is a state of the art. It was built by the developer. It was given to the city. The city's impact fees, paying it back over 30 years, but it can't nearly service the whole city of Northport. The Pan American facility desperately needs to be taken up to standard, and it's just got to get done. It's just got to get done.
So we got a question from Sean Kirkpatrick. Hey, Sean, how you doing, buddy? The question is, Mayor, can you explain how long and how much per household would a $15 million emergency borrowing project be handled, comma, or in parentheses, if it passes in May?
Hi, Sean. Great question. When we had Ian, we literally depleted our reserves. And it took us, 2, 3, 4 years to get virtually all of it back between insurances and FEMA. So if we had an emergency, let's say we had 2 back-to-back tough storms.
Never happened, ever.
Nah, never happened. We would probably utilize some of our reserves, but we would go out and find the state and federal low and no interest loans that they afford municipalities after disasters. We would borrow those, whatever those funds were needed. And what possibly would happen is some of them actually might be forgiven because that's to a degree some standard practice. But what would occur is over a short couple of year period of time, we would probably service that debt out of our reserves, out of our existing funds, and make application for reimbursements from insurance and FEMA. So we're probably talking a relatively short period of time to see them paid back. So the possibility of having to assess a tax increase would certainly not be anything near what might have to be considered if we didn't have the borrowing authority, because the government has these loans for us. And I don't know how exactly they're all structured. They're structured so many different ways. Some might be interest only, some may be no interest at all. I don't know when the payback periods kick in. But remember, after a storm, once damage is assessed, you go out and make application for reimbursement. So we're not talking about long-term debt here. That's why borrowing for emergencies is, it's almost like, how could you survive without this tool in the toolbox all along? We've just been bloody fortunate. When Ian hit, God forbid we had had another storm, even a level 3 hurricane. If that had happened to us after Ian, we wouldn't have had any money. What would have happened is piles of rubble would have sat for 6 months, a year, more. We just wouldn't have had the capability to deal with it. And
So
so the truth is, this is such an important tool to have in our toolbox, because it will prevent us from having to look to revenue sources that reach into the pockets of our citizens. It'll get paid back because it gets paid back by reimbursement. So
right. So, but I want to say this too, is that if I'm not mistaken, I was in the room with Chief Titus when the storm kind of turned. That storm, Helene, would have been a direct hit to us, and it was projected to be a massive hit. And we saw that on the coastline. Okay. Now, in saying that, if I remember correctly, I don't think we were funded yet from Ian when that hit. So that moment in time where that storm, Helene, turned, I know I was having conversations with leaders about the funding sources and the fact that we had already used our money for Ian and we were waiting on it to return. That borrowing power, it almost became reality.
Yeah.
It was so close, it wasn't funny. And I think people need to really realize how close we were to having a lot more pressure thrown on our city leadership than we had in the past. And the reason that we were able to rebuild and clean up so quickly is we had the reserves to do it.
That's right.
And you know, it was the assets that we had all put back and what we had planned on as leaders, so that set us up for success with Ian.
You look at, my God, look at how quick we sprung back. But think about, how many of us took a drive down to Fort Myers and Cape Coral, and in the recent couple storms, there's still parts of Englewood along the coast that roads you just can't traverse. What did I read? The beautiful road that you can traverse along the water there in Englewood. It's going to be 4 more years before that road's rebuilt. I mean, could you imagine if we had to go 6 months, a year or more with the bridges at Price Boulevard washed out, or some of our water structures so damaged? I mean, I can't even imagine how our city would have handled or could handle trying to get around, go to work, get our families here, there, and everywhere without the ability to move through our city. And we run that danger. We do. We have to be prepared to address these kinds of disasters. And if anyone thinks They're not going to happen again. I'm sorry. You can think what you want about global warming and all the rest, but the storms in, what was it? The statistic I heard when fire safety and police and emergency response had a seminar over at Suncoast not that long ago, a couple weeks back. And what did I hear? In like a 40-year period or something, 40, 50-year period, we had 8 significant storms. And in the past, handful of years, we've had that many again. I mean, you just can't deny that, we're having more storms and they're more severe.
So Sean has a follow up here. I think your answer needs to be better publicized. Many people think, and I got to tell you that the many people that are out there,
Yeah.
a lot of them don't care what comes out of city leadership's mouths. They've already made up their minds. A lot of them. So I'm not directing that at one person. I will say there's a lot of people that feel like our city leadership is not going to tell us preemptively how to cut costs and save money over time. But many people think that the debt is going to cost us a lot and exist for a long time. How do you kind of put that together in about a 4-minute clip?
Well, it's simple. Let's say the emergency borrowing fails and we had a storm. I don't know how quick we could ever, in the aftermath of a storm, how we could go out and ask our citizens to vote to give us permission to borrow money to help replace and repair the infrastructure that was damaged. Let's assume we could actually do that. We would go into the market and we would try to borrow that money somewhere. It would certainly be one heck of a lot more than the small window of opportunity there is to go to the state and federal governments and take advantage of emergency borrowing that occurs after storms. They have programs set up for that at low or no interest. So, you got to have that tool. You're only going to use it. We're only going to use it in the aftermath of storms and disasters. It's only going to be used for debris removal and the repair replacement of infrastructure that was directly affected by that storm. Read the language in this referendum. Read it. It is not what was in the November referendum. Please read it because it is dramatically different. You did not vote on this before. And, how do you publicize it? If you could get 90,000 people in a room, I'd talk to them. I'm doing it with town halls. We're doing it with town halls. I did it with a State of the City address. Everywhere I go and I talk to people, I try to spread the word. And those people need to spread the word. This is important. It will be telling how many people come out and vote. This is a crappy time to have an election. We had, in the presidential election, over 50,000 people in Northport voted. In my election in 22, we had about 35 because it's not a presidential year. I'm guessing we're going to have less than 10,000 people vote on things that are so important. That is a shame. Voting is a right, but it sure is a responsibility. Please learn, everybody, and come out and vote. And
ask questions.
And ask tons of questions. Don't just blindly accept what I say or what anybody says. Challenge these things. Ask, because when I speak to anyone, I can start with someone, in most cases, who are very, very reticent about voting for these. And if they're willing to listen and ask questions and have an open mind, when we're finished, they may not like that some of this might cost a little, but they get it. And that's all we ask for. Please don't close your mind on this. Never forget, despite what people's attitudes are towards elected officials and the government, we are, especially now in a world in this country of anti-government. There is no doubt about it. But I got to tell you, your local government is you. Okay? I pay taxes just like all of you. I live here and am impacted by our decisions just like you. If you think for 1 minute I make decisions that aren't what I consider to be in the best interest of us, you are sadly mistaken. And that goes for my other 4 fellow commissioners. We and most of our city staff and leadership, because they live in the city. City government tries to be the most responsive. It doesn't mean we always get it right. And it doesn't mean that doing the best for the most makes every single person happy. It will never do that. But God, please have a little faith and take the time to learn.
I appreciate your time, and I'm gonna end the show with, or the live stream with this, that if you're following social media and that's where you get your knowledge, push the leaders in those groups to get off their butts and stop being naysayers about everything out there. Educate yourself so you can be a participant within those groups and have a good conversation. And the best way to do that is attend some of these things, whether it's online or in person. Ask your questions, get yourself educated. Don't let someone else get inside your brain and dictate how you vote. Figure it out on your own and figure out what's best for you as a citizen and your community. That's the suggestion I have. Not all social media leaders are good citizen leaders. They're just in it for themselves. Keep that in mind. Have a great day. Mayor, I appreciate you all the way. And everybody out there, have a great weekend, and we'll talk on Monday. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Don, thank you, and thanks for everybody listening. Have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you.